Well, good evening and welcome to our channel. I am Joel,
And I'm Marlene.
and tonight we have an exciting episode for you. We are sharing our love stories with you.
Yes, I'm excited.
I'm interrupting this video to say that as I'm editing, I realized the audio is not very good on here. It was actually a big disappointment, and I've let it sit for a couple of weeks now, and I've gone back and forth, should I or should I not upload it? So I have decided to upload it, but I want you to let us know in the comments if the audio is too bad. We will simply need to refilm, and this time we did grab some little mics, and so hopefully this will be the end of our audio issues. So yeah, let us know below, and I apologize for the audio.
And we did not script this, so this is the original, I guess.
Exactly. We're just gonna say it as it comes to our mind. So, when did it all start for you, my dear?
So when I was 16,
Okay.
when you were 14, we weren't in school together,
Mhm.
but the first time I noticed you was it wasn't necessarily your looks, it was more your personality, your character.
Aw, thank you.
And to this day, I still highly value your character and your personality.
Okay. So, can you fill us in a little bit more? Like, when was the first time? Like, I know there's a story behind this, and I think maybe other people would find it interesting. I'm asking you first because your story starts quite a while before mine does, like a couple
Yes.
years before. Like you said, you were 16, and so what's one of the first instances you were referring to?
Yes, so
It feels weird asking that about my story, but I don't know.
yeah. So the first time that I really remember of thinking like that's the type of girl I want was one day your dad had invited me to come help. Um, I think it was stack lumber,
Okay.
but I had a rabbit hunting schedule for that day,
Okay.
and so we were hunting rabbits. And I told the guys, hey, I want to go home or I want to quit hunting,
Mhm.
and so I can go to your dad, help him with that.
Mhm.
I got there, they were pretty much done stacking lumber, which I kind of felt stupid to walk in by then, but there was more than just stacking lumber there. I had noticed you already, but what really caught my attention was your dad was had a conversation with another guy that was there, and I was just listening in on the conversation.
I see.
And then I can't remember the comment he made or what he said about you.
Mhm.
He just said something that you said, and I just remember just like that's the type of girl I want to marry.
So, in other words, Daddy was the one that gave it away.
I guess, yeah.
Because later on in the story, he thought we were too young.
Yeah.
Or it was a bit soon, so maybe we can blame him for getting it started.
Yeah.
uh, so, what happened from there? Like, fast forwarding, like, obviously, you said I was 14
Yeah.
and you were 16. So, I'm trying to think. I
When the
didn't know anything until I was 18, so that's like 4 years. What happened in that time span until, like, I know the story of when you actually talked to my dad about it. That was like 4 years later. So, what happened in that time frame?
well from the age of 14 to 18, or when you were that age, uh, we had our church wasn't we had a rule where we weren't allowed to date before we were 18. So in that period, it was basically just waiting till you were 18.
Gotcha, gotcha.
Um, and so yeah, if I had my sights set, I guess, and
Mm,
then when you turned 18, um, I talked with your dad, and his comment was, "We're still too young." What he was referring to was um, him and Marlene's mom were still too young to have a dating daughter, and well, my response to that was, well, she isn't. So I wasn't concerned about how old her mom and dad are, but I knew you were old enough now.
Well, it was a new step for our family because nobody else in the family had started dating yet. And so, yeah, it was news, I guess, for all of us.
Yeah.
So, where are we headed next?
And then I guess the next step after I had talked with your dad,
Mm-hmm. What did he say about it? Like, did you have any more conversation?
yeah, about a week later, he called me and said he wants to go out to eat with me, and that was great. We went to Longhorn. Um, we just discussed it a little more, and
Nut of some kind.
we just discussed it a little more, and I was very open to. I realized Marlene was still very young. I mean, it was no hurry for her to start dating or even get married.
And just to explain, in the culture, the setting we were in, how long would it how long would people usually have dated?
Usually, around a year, uh, year and a half. So her dad asked me, how long are you expecting to date before you get married? And I said, a year, give or take. And your dad just told me that he wants to talk with your mom and then he'll come back to me. And it wasn't long after that that he came back to me and he said that they discussed it and they think it would be a good idea to wait till you're 20 to get married.
Gotcha. And so, what what happened from there? If I was just turned 18 and you only wanted to date for a year, and now you decided you should wait until
Yeah,
I'm 20
so
to get married.
so your dad told me to wait till January 1st.
And when had you asked?
I had asked end of April. The first I mentioned something, your dad was the end of April.
Gotcha.
So now he asked me to wait till January, which I was fine with doing it, but it looked like a long time.
You are very patient. Because during all this time, I have no idea. There's a deer running through the woods back here. So if you hear background noise,
If you hear more background noise soon, I hear another vehicle coming up the driveway.
maybe we have to discontinue if they come closer. So now that it's quiet again, where were we?
We were. I just got done saying where Dad asked me to wait till January 1st to ask.
Yeah. So you asked like in May, you asked for permission to start dating, and then after some discussion, you decided to wait to ask until January, which was how many months? 8?
8 months.
8 months, yeah. So yeah, during all of this time, I have no idea. Like, I can't even tell you how far, like, the setting we were in. These bugs are getting the best of me. Anyway, so back to the story. If I stop being distracted. Yeah, during this time, I'm completely unaware of what's going on. I'm also in my first term of teaching. I taught school, and I loved it. I was definitely throwing my heart and mind and soul and everything into that. And I was really at a point in my life where I felt like I had found my niche, and marriage was definitely not on the radar. And so 1st of January was when you had agreed with my parents that you would continue pursuing a relationship, and it's I can't put put into words how much of a um, shocker it was for me to try to put that or to try to fit that into my life, if that makes sense, because it's so not what I visualized. I remember a couple months earlier, obviously my parents knew that he was interested, but I didn't. I remember telling them that I am loving teaching so much. If the school board members would hire me, I would sign a contract right now for 5 years, which ironically I would have been done with that contract about a year ago, 2 years now. Thankfully I did not do that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm in the middle of my school term. We're just back from Christmas break, and do you want to take up the story again? So how did you go about
Yeah. So
asking?
so
Because I'm still have no idea.
all along here, I was just waiting till you were old enough. Now I was waiting till January 1st. January 1st, that evening, um, the church people were skating on a pond, and I asked your dad if you're going. Um, he said he doesn't think you are. So I asked him if it would suit to come down and I guess just ask you if you want to start a relationship. And then, but later I found out you are going to come to the skating. So I changed my plans. Of course, I went to the skating. And so.
Can I insert?
Yeah.
I remember that evening actually, because I was also facing some health issues at the time, and so I had not gone skating at all that winter yet. So that's probably what made you think I wouldn't be there. But it was something I loved. And I remember last minute, I don't even know why, changing my mind and telling my parents, I think I'm going to go with my younger siblings. And I remember my parents just suddenly left for the pantry and they're whispering or whatever. And I'm like, what did I do wrong? And I asked should I not go? And they're, oh yeah, it's totally fine. You can go. And so,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I had no idea what it was about. I just knew that something had come up. I think they told me later that they realized they were going to have to tell you that I won't be home.
Yeah. And then, well, I figured I might get a chance at the skating, but it didn't happen. And then January 2nd came, and she had a school board meeting that evening, and my brother-in-law was a pastor at the church where we were at, and he knew that I was gonna ask you. So he told me if he'll let me know when you leave if he finds out or whatever. And so I was I drove past the schoolhouse, and just as I drove past the schoolhouse, you were walking out to your car. So I went and I turned around. And I knew I'm gonna get a chance somehow. So when I came back and past the schoolhouse again, she was just ready to leave the parking lot. So I was just not sure what to do until finally I was like, I know the route she takes home, and so I just drove in front of you. And finally, I felt like it was my last resort. So I just stopped at a stop sign.
You tried calling too.
Yeah. Actually, I tried calling you first to see if you can pull over to talk a little bit, but she didn't answer her phone. Later, I found out that she had her phone, or she forgot her phone at the skating the night before. So when I pulled up to the stop sign, I just waited for her to pull up behind me. I put my four-ways on. I come out and I go back to her and I ask her if she wants to, if she could meet me at a certain parking lot. And so you agreed to it.
I did. Blissfully unaware. I don't think I I can express how, I don't know, maybe I was just blind to what was going on. Like, looking back now, it's not like I didn't know you.
Mm.
Like, I was close friends with your sister or your sisters, and we had slumber parties at your house, like with your sisters, and so you were always the big brother that, I don't know, you were fun to hang out with. You would be the type that would play games with us younger girls, and I mean, you were fun to be around, but I wasn't really, like, it was so not in my radar at the time, and you just seemed older and kind of, I don't know, not really in my league, if that makes sense. Like, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
that makes sense.
So, like, that evening, it was my first day back to school after I was back from Christmas vacation. So, those of you teachers out there know that it takes a little bit of time to get back into your groove. And I remember it felt so good to be back in the classroom and to kind of get my bearings again. And we had a board teachers meeting that evening, like he mentioned, and meeting was done early, like 8 o'clock, like 8 p.m. I think we were done already. And so I remember being the first one to leave the building and going out to my car. It was cold. It was like a cold January night, like, I don't know, 20s maybe. And I don't remember there being snow, but it was cold, and I got in my car, and so I'm about 20 minutes from home, something like that. And so there's a small town about 5 to 10 minutes from where I was teaching, and that's the first where I caught up enough to you to where I recognized your vehicle, because you were familiar, like from youth group, from hanging out, like I knew you. But and I remember being surprised when we got to the intersection that you didn't go north, because normally that was, well, that's the direction you guys live, and instead you went east, the same route I was going home. And I remember noticing that, but I had school on my mind. I was processing the meeting, and I forgot about it, really. Like, I remember thinking about it, that you're going the same direction I am, and we were on that road for, I don't know, 3-4 miles maybe. Is it 5
At
miles?
least 4 or 5.
Yeah. And so we get to the end of the road. You have, like, there's an intersection where you have to go right or left, like the road stops, in other words. And so I got to the end of the road, and I pull up behind this car, and I don't think it was even registering that, oh yeah, I saw him in the previous town. I think I wasn't really, not really noticing, but as I was ready to, like, I was waiting on him to pull up to the stop sign and either go right or left. But he didn't move, and so I'm getting ready to steer around. You know, sometimes a vehicle, I don't know, stops for whatever reason and you have to go around them. Well, I thought that's what happened, and so I'm just getting ready to pull around him. He's put on his four-ways, and it's barely registering that's him. I'm just that it's him. I do remember that I'm, like, yeah, that I need to get around this car, and that I did see him in the previous town. Anyway, as I'm getting ready to do that, he gets out of his car, and he starts coming back, and I'm like, okay. So I wait, and I roll down my window, and I'm like, oh, probably one of my lights is shot or something, and he's kind enough to come back and tell me. And I remember you were a little bit, like, you were a very happy-go-lucky, cool, like, if that makes sense. Like, you didn't get worked up, or not in the sense of being, like, super, super serious, or however, how would you say, like, but I remember there was something different. Like, there was, like, something was serious. I almost thought he was apologizing for something, because he was, like, fairly serious about whatever he was doing. Anyway, all that to say, he asked if I would pull off at the next parking lot, and I'm like, sure. And I get back in the car, he pulls up, finally he goes, so I can go too. And do you mind if I say up until the parking lot?
Sure, yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
Anyway, on my drive there, people are probably thinking, like, surely by now, girl, you're getting the idea what he's after. But it still didn't cross my mind until I think I was just about there. It went through my mind, like, once, like, what if he's actually considering something like that? This, because, again, like I think we mentioned previously, in the setting we were in, we didn't just date to date, if that makes sense. Like, if somebody was thinking of dating or asking you out or asking you for a date, like, per se, they were actually thinking marriage. And so that's why it was such a big deal. And so it went through my mind, but I'm like, girl, your imagination has got the best of you. So I drop it and I pull in, and I'm thinking, oh, he works at a feed mill, and he's probably got some supplements or something for my dad. He's a farmer, and which is not, I don't think that's an unusual thing for you to drop stuff off or to come by. Like, you often hung out with my younger brother, and so it wasn't like you were a stranger.
Right.
It was just I had never put any, like, seriously considered something like this. So from your perspective, what happened?
So I pull in, I did a U-turn, she pulls in right beside me, and I just remember seeing her. She kind of looks scared, not sure what to think, and then I just asked her, do you want to share our friendship together? And do you remember your response?
Yeah, like you're meaning starting a courtship or dating.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to, like starting a courtship.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember what your response was at that moment or what was going on the inside of you by then?
Like shock. I don't think it's really registering totally what you're saying. And so I think at the tip of my tongue, like after maybe a second or two, or I don't know, did I pause for a couple seconds? I don't know. I remember just, like, without really thinking about it, I said, well, I'm willing to pray about it. But I'm laughing because I'm remembering some of the emotions and the feelings.
One thing I did tell her right then when she said she's willing to pray about it, I did tell her, there's no pressure. Take your time and pray about it.
The fact that you mentioned taking my time, I mean, I probably took more time than most any girl that I've heard, but that really helped because it took the pressure off. Like, my first response after he left was never. Like, anybody in their sane mind knows that we could never hit it off. Like, we were way too different. Like,
and I think it would have only been you that would have said so.
well,
or
but when we
in my
actually
mind.
started dating, like a couple months later, there were maybe
Yeah,
a handful of people, like among our friends and relatives, that had put us together. I think even our this is a funny story.
Yeah.
Maybe I should
know
share
what
this
you're
later.
talking. About your sisters.
Yeah, shall I say
Yeah,
that?
just say it.
So my two younger sisters were fairly close in age. We're obviously in the same youth group, and so they know him as well. They hang out with his younger sisters, and they start noticing that something's a little bit, off or different about him. And so, like sisters, I guess, do, I don't know. They were observing him fairly closely, had no idea he had an interest in me, and they're like, among each other, they're like, I think he's gonna start dating. Like, you can just kind of see it when the youth guys start thinking about dating and marriage. And they tried to think of a girl that would kind of fit him. Finally, they decided it must be somebody from out of state or somebody that they don't even know about, because they couldn't think of anybody that would, like, be compatible. So, to my defense, I'm not the only one that was thinking, like, whoever put this together.
Yeah. So after I had asked you, and you were on your way home, and you were rolling this through your mind, and you were like, never. But you still had to give me an answer.
Well, so I went
how did
home,
that go?
and I had one of the most miserable weeks of my life. I'm not kidding. It was miserable. I had so many different emotions from, like, I mean, obviously I felt I was surprised that he would even have noticed me in that way, if that makes sense. Like, that was such a shock.
Yeah.
But then secondly, it was so not what I was wanting to do with my life. And I couldn't see us working out ever. So to me, it was like, just end this before it starts. That way I won't have to deal with the pain later. And so I went home that night. My parents knew about this. Like, we shared that story. They knew about it. They didn't know specifically that he had asked on the way home, but I think they caught on to it when I got home without me saying a word that something had happened.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to decide how many details to share. Do you want me to share those details or not about when I talked to my parents for the first time and that whole week of when I wrote you a note and things like that?
Well, the thing of writing the no, I think
Maybe
that
explain that.
I think that'd be okay to say.
Okay. Shall I? Do you mind if I share yet about my parents?
Yeah, go ahead with that.
Or maybe I'm embarrassed too. I don't know. I guess
No, it keeps it interesting.
Well, they knew that it was probably going to be a surprise for me, since they hadn't mentioned a word to me. Like, they had given him permission to be the one to approach me about it. And so that evening, after my younger siblings went to bed, I mean, first of all, I could not eat a bite of supper. So I was doing my best to make sure that I was faking this whole thing to where nobody catches on that something is going on. Because I'm also thinking in my mind, I don't want my sisters that are close to me in age to find out, because I know they're close to, like, your sisters, and they also, like, we played together, we had a lot of fun in youth, and just as our family spent time together. And I'm like, it's going to make it awkward for them once they find out that you asked and I turned you down. Which sounds so cruel. But I felt like it was truly the best thing to just get it, like, deal with it right away and not drag it out. Because, yeah, like, it wasn't even a question in my mind as to whether it would work out or not. Like, I just knew it wouldn't.
Yeah.
So I told my parents that evening that I need to talk to them once the others are in bed. And so I went to my bedroom, and they come in like the good parents they are, and they asked me what happened, and I proceeded to tell them. This one guy stops me on the way home, and long story short, turned my world upside down because I didn't really want to deal with this. Like, yeah. Anyway, I think I was a little bit frustrated. I don't remember all the conversation, but later, when we were closer to getting married, I remember my mom telling me some of the ways that I responded and reacted that evening, so obviously it was fairly dramatic. Anyway,
Share at least one.
well, now it feels bad. It feels bad, like, that I would respond that way to now the love of my life.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe I should insert this to your defense. I know part of why I was reacting that way is sometimes when you haven't dealt with trauma from your past, you do tend to try to steer clear of anything that could potentially hurt you in the same way. And so I think that's why
I'm just laughing because I know what's coming. I wish I could have seen it.
Well, yeah. Anyway, where are we going?
Well, I think it's time to say about your paper in your hand.
Well, okay, I don't remember this specifically. This is what they told me later when we were closer to getting married. It did trigger a memory, but I wouldn't have remembered this. But the first night I talked to my parents about him, I explained to them how this all went down and how he used his four ways and stopped me and asked me to pull over, and I had no idea what he was after, etc., etc. And obviously, fairly exasperately, that's not even a word, but like in an exasperated fashion, I had a piece of paper or tissue or something crumbled up in my hand, and I just threw it to the side, and I'm like, what does he want with me? And yeah, obviously she remembered that to remind me about it later. Anyway, so like I said, it was one of the most miserable weeks of my life. I go back to school and I so desperately want to stay focused. I absolutely love teaching. I loved it. And I was doing my best to make sure that I think my biggest fear was that this was going to take some of my attention away from school, and I so wanted. To me, my students were worth my time and my attention, like not just part of it. And so I didn't really like it that he came along before I was done with the school term. It just felt like a distraction. And so I did my best to put it out of my mind and just focus on teaching. And by the end of the week, I was getting so, I was just ready to have this done with. And so I think it was like Friday night. This is first week of January. I get home and I tell my parents I made up my mind. I'm not ready for this. Like, I don't think at any point that there was even an option in my mind to do this. But I was like, there's no question. I'm not doing this, at least not at this time. And so I wrote him a letter. I didn't want to tell him face to face. Like, I didn't want to hurt you, honestly. But I also felt like it would just make it worse to start dating and not, since I, in my mind, knew or thought that it could never work out anyway. And so I kindly explained to you that for this season, I'm not okay with getting into a relationship. And I gave the letter to my dad. I asked him if he would take care of communicating with you. And we go to skating that Saturday. Obviously, we're having some cold weather because there was a lot of skating going on. It is now, you asked on Tuesday nights, it is now Saturdays. We're at the skating. I don't know, sometimes I wonder what you're thinking at this point. Because I know most people would have their answer by that time. What are you thinking by that Saturday? It's the first time we were together as a group, in a group, since you had asked. What's going through your mind? Are you expecting me to be struggling with it this much?
No, I did not expect you to struggle with it at all. But what I liked about it was now I know you know about it. And I don't have to hide it from you anymore.
Let me say, this guy did an amazing job of fooling me. I had no idea that he had a crush, because we revisited some happenings, like I said earlier, that we would hang out at their house. And I actually thought he had a strong dislike for me. That's why I was shocked that he even, I say dislike in the sense that we could have fun and play together and do games and stuff like that. But I actually thought you were kind of irritated by me, which I learned later was some major cover-up.
That was major cover-up, and that went overboard in covering up to make you feel that way. But as far as what I was feeling that day, specifically at the skating, was I was just loving myself, right, enjoying myself, and I had no clue what was going through your mind, or that even the night I asked you, you went home thinking never. I had no clue you had written a note to me.
Yeah.
And you were skating there, and you didn't show it.
I didn't?
No, you didn't show it. I didn't.
Because it was truly the most miserable skating I've had. Because I knew at that time, so his sister and I are close. We're actually teaching together. And I'm thinking she probably knows about it, and I'm feeling horrible on the inside, because I'm like, what she doesn't know is just last night I wrote a note to him, and you're there, and I can see you're having, like usual, the time of your life and being the life of the party, which I now love about you. And in a sense, I felt horrible to be breaking this up, to just do that. But there was no question in my mind as to whether, like, I was ready for it, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
I'm beginning to wonder. I think the sun is setting, and do you think we're about in the dark? Do you think
Yeah.
people can even still see us?
Should we go out there in the pasture?
I think we should move out to some more sunlight. And maybe we also should stop it right here and come do the next part in another episode, because I think we're getting fairly long-winded.
Yes.
And we've just started. We haven't even started dating yet. But that story is coming. Yeah, do you want to close out this video, and then we'll move out to another part where there's more light, and then we'll see you next week.
Yes. Thanks for watching this video, and live your dreams to the fullest. Pursue God, pursue the people you love, and do what you know is right.
And it eventually did work out for us.
Yes, it did.